Well, my daughter and I have made it back from our trip to Europe, and we had just the absolute best time. And I'm so excited to share with you guys about this trip and things I wish I would have known before we went. Hey guys, welcome back to my Practically Imperfect Life. You couldn't have watched a video of mine in the last few months and not know that my daughter and I were going to Europe this summer. I know I've been talking about it a lot. We've been getting a lot of things ready for it. I mean, it's just one of those things we've been so excited for so long. This was a troop trip for the troop that I lead, and the girls have been planning and saving for this trip for over 2 years. So it was just something that we were so anticipating, and it was every bit as wonderful as I thought it would be. It was just a remarkable experience to get to share, not only with my daughter, but with the girls that I've been the leader for the past, 11 years. And everyone just had a wonderful, wonderful time. So I thought today I would share with you a little bit about the trip, so show you some photos and some video clips that I took along the way, and share with you some things that I learned while traveling that I kind of wish I had been aware of, or that I'm definitely going to kind of file back to remember if we get to go back. I mean, we definitely would like to do a trip to Europe as a family. I know Greece and Rome are definitely on my bucket list, and Scotland and Ireland, and it'd be wonderful to be able to do this as a family again. Now, this trip, like I said, was a troop trip. So we did go through a travel agency. We went through Explorica, or World Strides by Explorica, and that is a group that does focus on planning trips for student groups mostly. So middle school, high school, college age students, and you can have a group that can be as large as 50 people. We took 30, and then we had 2 smaller groups that were kind of added on to our trip. So they met up with us in London, and so we had to think about 45 people in the group as a whole. Now that did take a lot of the stress off of me in terms of planning for things, because they organized the airline tickets, the hotels, all of the transportation. Breakfast was taken care of every day, dinner was taken care of every day, tickets to get into all of the museums and all of the sites that we went to see, all of that was taken care of for us. And they have, dozens of different trip options you can do. They have domestic ones, they have international ones. You can go pretty much anywhere over the world. Even within Europe, there were so many different options for trips, ranging anywhere from like 6-day trips to like 12 to 14-day trips, seeing different numbers of countries. You know, we had just pulled from the girls which countries they were most interested in seeing, and then that's how they narrowed it down to which one they were going to do. So if you do have a group of people, maybe a group of homeschooling students and parents who are looking to kind of plan a trip like that, and you want to find a way that's easy and pretty affordable, because when you group travel, it does tend to be a little bit cheaper, I would highly recommend checking them out. They were very easy to work with. They kept in constant communication with me about things that needed to be done and when they needed to be done. They just made the whole process, so smooth. And the best part of working with them was that we had a tour guide with us the entire time. She met us at the airport in London, and she was with us all the way until we checked in at the airport the day we departed. She's a Europe native and has so much experience and so much knowledge, and just taught us things about customs and culture and lots of historical facts, and even just practical things like how do you get around some of these cities and how do things work. Everyone on the trip, when I pulled the girls at the end and I asked them what some of their favorite things were, they all voted for her. They said she was amazing. And you might see her in some of the video clips that I'm going to show in some of the pictures. So let's talk a bit about some of the things that had to be arranged kind of prior to going. And one of those things was getting money exchanged. We had heard from different sources, like recommendations for the amount of money to take with you for each day, like per person. Like I said, breakfast and dinner were covered for us every day, but we did have to buy our own lunches, or if you wanted to grab a snack or a drink, souvenirs, things like that. And we had heard it recommended anywhere from $40 per day per person to $80 per day per person. I definitely budgeted on the higher side of things just because I knew I wanted to get like souvenirs and things like that for people at home. And I tried to avoid like trinkety souvenirs, things that are just going to go into a junk drawer and never actually be used. And I wanted to find things that were more practical. I talked about this in a day in the life video recently, how we had bought like perfume in France. I had purchased some clothing items, like just some, more fashionable items that I thought I would actually, wear. I did order a cuckoo clock in Munich, like a real cuckoo clock, handmade, wood, handmade mechanicals on the inside, and that's getting shipped over from Munich to here, and I'm super excited for that. I have wanted one forever, and they just do a remarkable job with the craftsmanship at some of the Munich shops. So I did order one, and that was a little pricey, but I budgeted for it. So my first recommendation would be definitely budget for more than what you think you will spend. And then that way you have some cushion. If you find that kind of rare or unique thing that you want to get, that you're not going to be able to get in the States, you can get it and not feel bad about it. Or if you want to stop and do a coffee and a pastry at a cafe every day, you're not stressing about that added cost, because we definitely did. That was one of our goals, was to try coffee and a pastry in every city we went to, and we met that goal. And it was all very good. So budgeting for that. Now, we did exchange money in advance. So I had gone to my local bank and I got pounds to use in London. I got euros to use in France and Germany, and then I got Swiss francs for Switzerland. And it turns out I probably could have just skipped the money exchange altogether. And you might go, well, why would you say that? You don't want to try to find a place to exchange it overseas. Well, most places, in fact, almost every place we went to took credit cards. And I used a credit card I already had. I had checked with my bank, made sure that it would work internationally without any fees. And if you don't have one, that's probably one thing I would say, go ahead and make sure you have, is a credit card that can work internationally with no additional fees for international purchases, or when they do the exchange rates, because almost everywhere took a card, and it was so much easier to just pull that out and tap it and be done, and not worry about the fact that, like, if I paid in bills that I had gotten in the States, I was getting coins back, and the bank won't take coins back. I actually have a big stack of coins from all of the different currencies because I didn't end up spending them, and I can't exchange them back at the bank. So I'm kind of like just stuck with them as souvenirs. So I would say, you almost could just not worry about taking cash. The one place where I did need it was when we were in Zurich, and that's only because we went shopping at this little marketplace that I'll talk about here, and everyone was taking cash there. But for the most part, I was able to just use my credit card, and that made life so much easier. So day one was technically a travel day for us. So we got on the flights and we flew overnight, and we landed the next morning around 11 a.m. in London. And that's where we met up with our tour guide, and things got started for us right away. We took a bus from there to our first hotel, and that's when we first learned that air conditioning is not a big thing in most European countries. In fact, we stayed at 4 different hotels, and none of them had air conditioning. None of them. Most of the museums we went to were not air conditioned. Restaurants were not air conditioned. Very few stores were. It's just not a big thing there. So if you find a place that has AC, that's a pretty special place. But it was hot while we were traveling. And so that kind of brings me to my next tip, is be prepared if you're traveling during the summer for hot weather. Dressing appropriately for that weather, because it gets very warm. Places can be very crowded. And if you are a person who tends to run warm, you will feel overheated very quickly. You also just want to kind of be prepared, especially for like sleeping at night, because usually I'm like even in the summer, I'm like a pajama pants and a long sleeve shirt and getting all bundled up in bed kind of person. But when there's no air conditioning and no fans in the hotel rooms, it gets really stuffy really quick. And sometimes the hotel rooms would have windows with screens, so you could open up the windows at night and get a little bit of a cross breeze. In Germany, the windows did not have screens, and so we had tried opening the window, and then bugs started just like flying in like crazy, so we very quickly shut the windows. And so that was, probably not the most comfortable thing in the world, going without it. You kind of get a little used to it over time, and but it can be a lot, especially when we were hitting days where it was like 86, 87 degrees. That got pretty warm, because even on our bus, they didn't run the AC on the bus all the time. A few times we did finally like request it. We were like, everyone's kind of dying back here. Can you please turn on the air for a little while? So just kind of be prepared for that. And kind of tied into that too is that ice coming with like your drinks is not standard. None of the restaurants where we had dinner at served ice in any of the beverages. Our tour guide told us it's because they didn't want it, they don't like to put ice in drinks because they believe it dilutes the drink and like decreases the flavor of the drink. And meanwhile, we're just like, I want my drink to be cold. Now you can request it though, because most of us would request like a cup of ice and they'd bring us out a big cup and we would use that. So you can request it. Just know that it's not standard on things, and drinks aren't always served cold. Like even if they bring you like a bottle of something, it's more room temperature than it is actually chilled. So that was a bit of a surprise. So anyways, once we got settled in at the hotel and dropped off our stuff, we learned about the London tube system, which is their subway system. And again, this is where having the tour guide was really handy because she showed us how to get the subway tickets. We would get a pass each day we were in a city. It was kind of like an all-day travel pass, so we could use it to get on and off the subway, you know, multiple times during the day. And in London especially, you can purchase tickets for like a different number of trips within certain areas of London. You can purchase all-day passes. If you're going to be there for an extended period of time, they have, I believe it's called like the Oyster card, where you can put, you know, a certain amount of money on it. The London tube system is one of the more expensive ones in Europe, but it is it's very clean, it's very efficient. Things seem to run, you know, just pretty continuously. Like when we go down there, there'd be a subway arriving like every couple of minutes. So you weren't really waiting for a very long time to hop on and get to your destination. They have large maps set up all throughout the subway areas, so you can figure out, you know, where you're at and where you're going. And, you know, if you've traveled to like New York and things like that and you've seen their subway systems, it kind of reminds me of that, where, you know, you'll have a line that runs a certain direction and then you have spots where you need to get off and get on a different line going a different way. We rode what they call the Lizzie line or the Elizabeth line quite a bit to get around. And so you have like a ticket. It goes through their little system to get on. And then you actually, in most cases, you have to actually scan it again to leave the subway when you're all done with your run. So you don't want to lose those tickets because you need them to get out of the subway as well as getting onto it. But it was a really efficient way of travel. So we got on the Lizzie line and we traveled into town. And our first evening, we kind of did like a walk around. We got a chance to just kind of see like a couple of different shops. We saw where the Harry Potter and the Cursed Child Theater was. That was pretty cool. We had a dinner of fish and chips, and then we went to Covent Gardens, and that place was just a lovely little place. We walked through this long kind of alley, and she was explaining that in different parts of London, there are buildings of different ages, and this was one of like the oldest areas. I mean, lots of hundreds buildings that were hundreds of years old. And it felt like we were walking through Diagon Alley. Got that vibe there. And in fact, like in the video, you'll see like there's a window that has like a little owl in it. And I was like, I swear we're in Harry Potter. But Covent Gardens is like a big marketplace. It's got this whole long history to it, but there are so many different types of shops and eateries. There were live street performers that you can stop and watch. There's this big, beautiful kind of glass roofed area with all of these different shops. The one recommendation I would have is if you are planning to go to Covent Gardens, I would go more during the day. We went near the end of the evening. I think we were there, I don't know, 6, 7 p.m., something like that. And a lot of the little aisle shops had already shut down for the day. So the stores were still open, but like the little kind of here and there shops were closed for the day. So we kind of missed out on those, but we were able to go and pick up a few little souvenirs and watch the street performers. And that was pretty much like our first day in London. But at that point, a lot of us were getting kind of tired because, you know, the time change and everything. So day 2 in London was our really big day. We started off the day going to the National Gallery, and we had a couple of hours to kind of walk around the streets, go through the museum. The museums in London are free And that's pretty fantastic. So you can go in, you know, for however long you want. So if you wanted to pop in and check one out for a little while and then pop into another one, I mean, that makes it great for the budget for families, right? You can go in, and I would give yourself lots of time. Like we spent about an hour, a little over an hour in the National Gallery. And I mean, we only saw a fraction of it. I mean, we were kind of honing in. We wanted to make sure we saw like some of the Van Goghs and the Monets and things like that. But there's so much to see there, and it's kind of nice if you have that extra time to kind of sit back and just really enjoy the art. I have always enjoyed when we go to these art galleries when my kids recognize pieces that we studied in art history, and that makes me feel like I'm doing something right as a homeschooling mom. And from there, we walked to Buckingham Palace. It really wasn't, you know, that bad of a walk. I mean, it's a bit of a trek, but it's not terrible. I mean, it took us like, I don't know, 10 minutes to walk there. But it's down that long road that you always see like the big royal processions on, you know, like when someone's getting married and things like that. And it's just, I don't know, it was like mind blowing to be walking down that street. I was like, oh, Queen Elizabeth's been on this road and King Charles has been on this road and Prince William and Princess Kate. I mean, it was just, you know, I'm a little bit of a fan of the British royals, can you tell? So I was like fangirling a little bit. And you get to see Hyde Park is there, and we went all the way down to Buckingham Palace, and there were these gorgeous gardens in front of there. And if you want, you can get like all the way up to the gate. There were, I mean, gosh, hundreds of people kind of pressed up by the gate, and the tour guide said that they have been waiting there for the changing of the guard. She says it's, you know, it's a big deal, but you have to get there hours in advance if you want to be able to actually see it, which, you know, we weren't going to be there for that long. But it was really cool to get to do that. And so that would be yet another tip, would be to be prepared for all of this walking. We probably logged, I think, and I know the step tracker on my phone isn't totally accurate, but I think the least amount of steps I did in a day on this trip was 17,000. And most of the days I went over 20,000. We just walked and walked and walked everywhere. And you can get to a lot of things just on foot. And so if if you're prepared for that, if you make sure that you've brought proper shoes, you know, don't even worry about packing your pretty shoes, guys. Just pack a really good pair of tennis shoes or some really comfortable slip-ons, something that will, you know, just protect your feet and keep you from getting blisters. Because, I mean, we just walked, we logged miles each day, but it was well worth it. But Buckingham Palace is just absolutely amazing. And then we had some time for lunch, and then we did a little bit of a bus tour around London. Now, we did bus tours in London and again in France, and while they're cool, you know, it's nice to kind of like ride around and have somebody like teaching you about places. Honestly, the bus tours weren't like the highlight of the trip for me because, one, you know, you're moving down the road. So it's really hard if you want to take a photo of something or if you want to get a closer look at something. Occasionally they were able to park the bus and we would all get off and we'd be able to go up somewhere and get a picture. Like we did that with like the with like London Bridge, and then we did it with Tower Bridge. But you know, it just felt like I'd look at something and she'd be talking about it and then we'd be down the road past it again. I would have much rather done like a walking tour in some of those areas, or even just kind of been able to like be dropped off in the area and get to walk around those a little bit more on our own. We were dropped off after the bus tour at Westminster Abbey. So we got to see that. You can see Parliament, Big Ben. You can see the London Eye from there. Like that's all kind of in like one area, you know, again, all accessible on foot. We didn't get a chance to go into Westminster because they have certain times a day when you can pay to go in for a tour, and then they have like services and stuff. So we didn't go in and do a tour inside, but we got to see around the outside. And we walked around and got some up close pictures here of like Big Ben, like I said, in of Parliament. We also didn't ride the London Eye. I would have really loved to ride the London Eye, but they recommend you buy tickets in advance, and tickets are expensive for the London Eye. For those of you who don't know, it's basically like a giant slow-moving Ferris wheel. There's like these big kind of like carriages, almost like you get in and you can fit a bunch of people in there, and it's like a 30-minute rotation. Like it slowly goes up and around, And I guess you can like cater food and all that stuff too, but it's like a whole event, but it's expensive to go on. So that wasn't part of our trip, but I would have really have loved to get to do that, especially as we were kind of getting into the evenings. I think it would have been really cool to see like London at night from way up there. But that was our 2 days in London. So then we went to the hotel and we had a good night's rest before we headed off to Paris. So we started off day 4 of our trip traveling from London to Paris, and we left super early in the morning, and we took an underground train that went from London, it went under the channel and then came up onto land and took us the rest of the way into Paris. That was a pretty cool experience. The train went, it was something like 180 miles an hour. It was super, super fast, very cool. And it kind of reminded me a little bit like checking in for the airport. You have to show your passport and they scan it. You go through security, they check all your luggage and all of that stuff. There is not a lot of space for luggage on those high-speed rails. So if you do plan to go from country to country, just remember to pack small. I mean, we all had like carry-on size bags and then like a duffel bag or a backpack or a purse. But there wasn't a whole lot of room to actually stash your luggage. But those high-speed rails, they had like a cafe on board, so you could go and you could buy a sandwich or a coffee. You could just kind of lay back and relax. A lot of us slept because we left so early in the morning. I mean, I think we had to leave the hotel at like, I don't know, like it was like 5:45 in the morning. It was really early. But that was because, it does take a few hours even by high-speed train to get from England to Paris. And once we got to Paris, we dropped our things off at our hotel. And again, it was like no AC and everything, but we were near this cool little plaza and you could just see the Eiffel Tower and the Arc de Triomphe kind of down on the horizon from our hotel. And it was right near the subway line, which was awesome. And once again, our tour guide helped us kind of navigate the subway. We had the tickets that you had to scan getting off and getting on. The one difference here is that, of course, now everything is in French. And so one thing that she did recommend if we are ever traveling on our own is to have some of the train apps that are available. There's a whole bunch of different versions of them available on like the Android store and on the Apple store that you can get that will help you navigate the rail systems. Again, it's a really efficient way to travel. It can get kind of pricey just depending on whether you're purchasing like single trip passage or if you're purchasing like an all-day ticket. But if you do have a larger group, you can get group rates on tickets as well. She mentioned that. But we took that in and we went all the way down to the Louvre. And that place is amazing. I mean, there's so much history there. I mean, she was telling us all about the palace and the palace history and kind of how it is that it came to be a museum, because it was a palace. That's what it was. And it was turned into a museum, after the French Revolution. So it was pretty fascinating to find out kind of the history of that, because I didn't know that about it. And yeah, we saw the pyramid and the inverted pyramid. Now tickets to the Louvre are, they're timed tickets. So when you purchase them, you have kind of an entry time, and it was packed. It was absolutely packed with people. Now, I mean, that could be one that we were there on the 13th of July, and the French kind of Independence Day is on the 14th. So a lot of people were on holiday, but she said it's just busy all the time. It's a big tourist attraction. And I mean, it was kind of like you're kind of packed like sardines in a lot of rooms. And again, it wasn't air conditioned, so it was hot and crowded. We only had about 2 hours to explore the museum, which was it was nowhere near enough. If you're gonna go, unless if you're not going as part of a tour group and you can choose how much time you have, definitely give yourself at least half a day, because there's so much to read. Some plaques, like explaining things, were just in French, and some were in both French and English. And I had like a little app on my phone where you can scan things and it'll translate it for you. And that was helpful for the ones that weren't in English. But I would have loved to just actually read about everything. I'm that kind of a nerd. Like, I want to actually know more about it. But yes, the Mona Lisa is there. They have a whole bunch of protections in place right now, because there have been people doing protests recently who have been throwing things at the art, or I guess the new thing is like gluing yourself to displays and things like that. So they have a bunch of security precautions, and you actually have to get into a separate line to like weave up to see the Mona Lisa. And even then you're still, you know, a distance from it. But don't go there just to see that, because there's so much more to see. Look up a lot, because some of the most beautiful things in that museum are the ceiling paintings. They're gorgeous. They are absolutely stunning. We saw the coronation of Napoleon, which is huge. There was a whole room that was crown jewels. So there were jewels that belonged to Napoleon and to his wife. They're on display, tiaras and pendants and brooches, and they're beautiful. There's a huge section of Egyptian art, sarcophagi and mummies and just different artifacts. We saw the winged Nike, which we had studied in art history, so that was really neat to see in person. Another room just filled with marble statues. I mean, I don't know, there's something about marble work that, I don't know, it's one of my favorite things to check out in museums. And I maybe it's just the idea that, you know, it's like one wrong move and the whole thing would be ruined. And they're just absolute perfection to go and see. That was, I could have spent so much more time in there. She had these scavenger hunts that she gave us. And she said, you don't have to do it, but it is a nice way if you want to try to hit some of like the big things along the way. And so that was kind of helpful, because it gave directions like how to turn and go through the different parts of the museum, because it is a big maze. It's a very big maze. You can easily get lost. And there's lots of spots where you like when you look on the map, it like the maps that they have on the walls in different places, it looks like you're going straight. But in reality, like you're going to go straight, then you're going to go down some stairs, and then there's going to be a little walkway, and then you're going to go up some stairs, and then you're going to continue. And whew, I mean, it took a minute to kind of catch our bearings and figure out where we were at. So definitely just kind of be prepared for that. In the Louvre, it's just a little bit of, I don't know, it's a little bit tricky to like get the hang of how to get around there, and then give yourself lots and lots and lots of time. Now, after we got done there, we took a very long walk. This is where, like, again, comfortable shoes comes in. We walked down the Seine River all the way down to where Notre Dame was. And that was a good, I don't know, half-hour walk. I mean, we kind of took our time. We stopped and looked at things along the way. But that area there along the river was kind of like the picturesque Paris that, you know, you have in your mind. You look and you've got the old buildings, and they got the balconies and flowers everywhere, and just these beautiful old buildings, because so many of them are original. And it's just a wonderful place to kind of just stroll along. They have areas where there are steps that go down to kind of like the river, so you could go down there and you could sit. There were people down there picnicking, reading books. She talked about how in the summer they'll put out like beach chairs and umbrellas, and people will go and sit out there during the day. And it's just kind of a nice little relaxing spot that anybody can use. And we walked all the way down to Notre Dame, which is still under reconstruction. So yeah, you probably are aware that there was a huge fire there a few years ago, and it caused some pretty massive damage. So there's a lot of scaffolding and things like that in place around it, but it's still incredibly impressive. And I guess they're kind of in a rush to get it done before the next Olympics, because they're anticipating, you know, a lot of people being around. So they're really pushing to have that reconstruction work done. But whew, that place is gorgeous. It's so gorgeous. And I wish we, you know, could go in and have seen it on the inside, but from the outside even, it's beautiful. And then we walked over to this little area to have dinner. And again, we were given some free time to just kind of roam around, check out the shops. That's where I got a chance to go shopping and got some clothing items. My daughter picked up a dress, and we found this little like hole in the wall place. I mean, it was so tiny. It was like one little window, little door, and it was a place that made crepes. And so the window's open, and then there are these big stones, and this gal's making the crepes right there in front of you. And they were so good. Oh, they were so delicious. So I would definitely check out like these tiny little places, like these little kind of shops, little cafes, little bakeries. You know, don't just look for like the big giant places or the familiar names, because some of the best things that we tried and found were in these just tiny little shops kind of along the way. And then after that, we had dinner and we went back to our hotel and called it a night for that day. So the next day was July 14th, which I mentioned was like the Independence Day in France. And that would be my next tip, is try to avoid countries or cities on big national holidays. It kind of goofed with what we were supposed to do that day. We had a bus tour that morning, and we were dropped off in a couple of places. You know, we got out and got to take some pictures and look around at some things, but we were supposed to go all the way down to the Arc de Triomphe, and we were supposed to go to the base of the Eiffel Tower, and we couldn't do either on that day because those things were kind of shut down and blocked off for the holiday. They had a big parade and everything. So we couldn't do some of those things, and that was a little disappointing to not be able to do that. But it was simply because it was a big national holiday. On the plus side, we did get to see the military flyover. So we were on one of the bridges on the sign, and there were just all of these planes that came overhead. One of the girls got like the perfect shot, which I'll show you here, of the first plane going over with the colors of the French flag. And so that was really cool to see. We didn't watch the parade or anything, but it just kind of created a little bit of a hiccup in our plans. So because of that, the tour guide had come to me and she said, well, we've got this big block of time that would have normally been spent going and doing those things. She goes, well, I have a suggestion for you. What would you think about doing a tour of one of the oldest perfume factories? And I said, oh, well, sure, why not? And I'm going to try to find the name of it and put it down here on the screen. But guys, if you go to Paris, go to this place. It was a fantastic, it was like the happy little accidents that Bob Ross talks about. It was not something that was on our plan, but I'm so glad we went. I mean, the gal gave us a tour of the whole place, talks about the history of perfume making, what goes into it, taught us a lot about how they're formulated, the things that a perfumer has to follow as far as rules. You know, how they can't eat certain foods, they can't drink, they can't smoke, anything that would ruin their nose palette, they can't do. I mean, we learned a ton of great things. And then we went up to this area. They showed us a bunch of different samples, talked to us about properly storing your perfume, the difference between different things. One of the funny things was that she handed out, sticks with samples. Like we'd smell one and we'd talk about what it is that we, what scents we recognized. And after we would do two, she said, okay, now you need to reset your nose, because if you just keep smelling different perfumes, you'll actually stop smelling all of the scents because your nose is overwhelmed. And she goes, you have to smell something neutral. She goes, smell your hair, smell your arms, smell your armpit, smell something to reset your nose. So it was just kind of funny. We got a picture of all of the girls where we were all smelling a perfume and then we were all doing a reset. And that kind of became a joke. Anytime we'd come across a smell that we didn't like the rest of the trip, one of the parents would yell out, okay guys, reset, and we'd like smell our arms. But go to this factory. It was just such a great learning experience. And then they had just some wonderful things you could purchase. I showed it in my day in life video, but I got a set of French perfume. We got five small bottles of different perfumes. I got cologne for my son, but they had soaps and lotions and things like that too. And it was just a wonderful little unexpected side trip. And then after that, we had a few hours. We actually had almost 3 hours of free time to kind of walk around and shop. A couple of us went to a French cafe for lunch. And this is something else that I found out that was cool, is that in France, like the cafes, if like you look at the ones on the sidewalk, the chairs are never arranged with people facing each other. So you're not sitting there like across from who you're sitting with. Instead, the table and the chairs are arranged so everybody is kind of looking out on the street. Because apparently the thing is, you want to people watch while you're eating, and you want to be watched by the people on the street. So it's almost like kind of like a performance back and forth. And I mean, that was how every single cafe we passed, how all of their chairs and tables were set up, was with everyone kind of facing the street. But we had just a wonderful meal, got some French coffee, We enjoyed a great pastry dessert. It was really nice, and it was nice to have several hours to just kind of go around and check things out. We went into this really glamorous, like high-end mall. It had all of these like high-end fashion designers in there, and we walked around pretending we had, the money to spend there. But we did not buy anything there. But it was nice, and it was all kind of circulated around the opera house, which is another just gorgeous structure. Oh gosh, the architecture. I mean, I could have stared at all of the different architecture for days. There's just something about these old European buildings, the attention to detail, and all of these little hidden designs you can find. I mean, if you have anyone in your family who is interested in architecture or in art history, I mean, Europe is the place to go because it's just absolutely stunning. Now, our time there in France, like I said, we mentioned we stopped and got coffee. And it was at that point that, I really started to notice kind of a trend. And that is that in most of these places that we went, if you're a big coffee drinker, first of all, that very few places had any milk substitutes. I mean, it was, you got milk with your coffee. That's what you got. You got milk or milk foam. A lot of them didn't have the option to, do like almond milk, oat milk, soy milk, all of that. And I'm an exclusive almond milk drinker. Like I don't drink regular milk normally. So that kind of did some weird things with my stomach, switching over to regular milk for a week. So be kind of prepared for that. And they don't automatically sweeten their coffees. So when I would get like a latte, it was unflavored. So it was literally just espresso and milk. And many of the cafes I went to, they didn't have the option for you to have any flavorings put in. There were a few that had, options. You could get caramel or vanilla and things like that. But you know how you can go to like Starbucks and they've got like a ton of different flavors you can put in your latte. Most of the places that we stopped at didn't have those options. So, just kind of know that it's going to taste different. Now, the coffee quality itself, though, was so much better than anything I have ever had before. It was so good. I mean, I didn't mind the fact that it didn't have any flavoring to it because the actual coffee itself didn't have that kind of bitter taste that so much of our coffee here in America seems to have. And things, aren't really sweetened. They typically will have like little sugar packets at the tables, and then they have packets of sugar substitutes, and they are tablets instead of powders. So, you drop the little tablets in if you wanted to dissolve that. And that was kind of funny because it looked like, it just kind of fizzled in your coffee. So you can, use those to sweeten your drinks, but when you just order them, they're not going to come with flavoring and they're not going to come with any kind of sweetener in it. So it was a little bit of a surprise there. The other thing we found when we were going around and picking up snacks and stuff like that is that a lot of the drink options are very different than what we have here. Now, part of that is that they have so many more restrictions on what is allowed to be in food, which made me realize just how bad some of the stuff that I drink is. Like, I love Diet Mountain Dew. Like, that's my go-to soda. And there was no Mountain Dew in any of these countries that we went to. Like, it just wasn't sold there. One of the moms really likes Dr. Pepper. You couldn't find Dr. Pepper like anywhere. It was like there was Coke and then there was Coke Zero. So it wasn't even like Coke and Diet Coke. It was Coke and Coke Zero. And those were your soda options. But they do have a lot of different kind of like fruit drinks or like fruit sodas, most of which are sparkling. In fact, a lot of times, like if you ordered a water, it came as sparkling water. There were different types of, like I said, kind of like a fruit, so it's not quite a soda, but like a fruit drink. And it was like a sparkling drink, and they were delicious. I mean, they were really, interesting to try. It just, wasn't what we were used to. So if you're like a diehard Pepsi fan, one, you're gonna have a really hard time finding it because, Coke kind of dominated everywhere we were. And if you're a diehard Diet Coke fan, you're just going to have to live with Coke Zero for the duration of your trip to Europe. So just kind of be aware of that. So anyways, after we had that nice long stretch, we went from there to a river cruise. So we did a Seine river cruise. I loved that cruise. I highly, highly, highly recommend. It was just a nice, easy hour-long boat tour. You know, we just went down the river one way and then we circled and we went back. They told us about the different things we were passing, different buildings, different bridges. We were actually able to see the Eiffel Tower. I mean, the next best thing to being right in front of it was seeing it from the boat. I mean, it was beautiful and stunning, and the boat was moving at a slow enough rate that you had plenty of time to take all kinds of pictures. Plus, the weather was gorgeous. It was warm and just beautiful, and there was the breeze off the water, and it almost felt like air conditioning when that breeze kind of hits you. But I would highly recommend doing one of the boat tours in Paris. I feel like that was definitely one of the highlights. And then that evening we went back to our hotel and they were doing fireworks for the celebration that evening at the Eiffel Tower. So we went out and we were able to watch the fireworks, which were just stunning. It was a stunning firework display. You know, I always say like the best fireworks that I've ever seen were at Disney World when they do them at the Magic Kingdom. And this was just, I mean, it was better than that. It was an amazing firework display. So that was probably like the only perk to being there on a holiday, was getting a chance to see that and seeing the Eiffel Tower all lit up with fireworks. Well guys, as I'm editing, I'm realizing that this vlog is getting quite long and we still have 2 countries to explore. So I'm gonna go ahead and end the vlog for today here. And then I will do a part 2 where I'll show you things that we saw in Switzerland and in Germany and share more tips on things I wish I'd known before we went to Europe. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe before you go. And as always, thanks for watching.